Welcome to Hairenik. Today we have a very special guest, Siranush Sahakyan. She's a human rights lawyer and specialist in international law and the director of International Comparative Law Center. Welcome, Siranush, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Could you please tell us more about how you started working in defense of our POWs, your history working in defense of Armenia against Azerbaijan, and which stages it underwent?
So basically, it goes back in 2000 when Azerbaijan acceded to Council of Europe, and then legal instruments were created to adjudicate on human rights cases. And even during this period of so-called peace, many incidents of grave human rights violations occurred. Mostly the villagers were attacked by Azerbaijani armed forces. They abducted the villagers, took to Azerbaijan, and then tortured, killed, and there was no investigation to understand the fate of killed Armenians. But also the high-profile case of Gurgen Markaryan emerged, which resulted from the cooperation between Azerbaijan and Hungary, though Hungarian courts sentenced to imprisonment Safarev, and then for a few times they refused to extradite Safarev, understanding the high risks of impunity within Azerbaijani society. The change of government resulted in unlawful decisions. Azerbaijan invested in the economy of Hungary, and the new government easily extradited the murderer to Azerbaijan. So at that point, we initiated a litigation before European Court of Human Rights, and we also documented and again initiated strategic litigation based on other cases of torture and murder of Armenians within the jurisdiction of Azerbaijan. So our litigation was successful despite long term of judicial proceedings. At this moment, we have more than 10 final judgments which confirm gravest forms of human rights violations. And also we have a court acknowledgement that those crimes were committed based on ethnicity of the victims, and there was no investigation against because of discrimination and hatred against Armenians in Azerbaijan. This created experience in terms of dealing with Armenia-Azerbaijani cases. I was involved also in actions during 2016 war. During this war, again, war crimes happened. We had 3 beheading cases of soldiers. We had killings of elderly Armenians in Talish, and we had the cases of mutilation of dead bodies, again based on hatred against Armenians. So at that point, with a team, we took those cases to international bodies, and as a logical continuation of our work, we undertook responsibility for the violations and crimes that happened during 2020 war and afterward developments.
Which stage is this work on, and what has been the case of our POW still held there? At which stage is it? And also, what was your work on the day-to-day when you were dealing with these cases? Were you working with the parents? Were you working with which bodies?
this point, we represent around 400 victims, and we cover a wide range of issues. The first important one is the repatriation of prisoners of war. And here we have also successes because around 210 Armenians returned to Armenia based on legal and political efforts. However, those cases are of great relevance considering that still 23 Armenians are unlawfully held in Azerbaijan. And apart from that, we have no information about 80 captives who were subjected to enforced disappearance. We have this humanitarian issue about missing people. The search operations are not efficient due to obstacles by Azerbaijani side, and this continues to cause mental and other form of harms to families. We mostly work with families, so the families approach us. They give us authority to represent their rights internationally, and they share with us the information they possess, and collectively we make efforts to understand the evidentiary basis of a case, and after examining the case, we work on evidence collection and build a case to be submitted to international bodies. All our cases were registered. We successfully passed this admissibility phase, and they are now under consideration. We have advancements in high-profile cases. For example, the Hadrut execution case. So when two captives were subjected to extrajudicial killing in the square of Hadrut, and this incident was investigated by international journalists as well, was communicated to Azerbaijani government. So they responded to our application. We made our observations to their comments. So this case is about to be completed. We were successful to have a prioritization of this case. So we made a motion to the court, justified how important are the issues brought before the court. So they agreed with our argumentation and applied Rule 4041, which means speedily examination of a case. So we hope that in this year or early next year we might have a very important judgment on this case. But we have also other cases about POWs which are now in Azerbaijan. For example, the case of Ludwig Mgurchan. So the legal processes, they have their pace. However, with this low pace, we have big advancement, and we expect new judgments this or next year.
We know that Azerbaijan treats all of its prisoners, including some of their internal problems like oppositionals, activism, any problems to Aliyev's regime are also treated badly. But do we have any information about how our prisoners, Armenian prisoners, are treated versus Azeris?
We can confirm that there is a systemic administrative practice of maltreatment of people deprived of liberty in closed institutions of Azerbaijan. And the harshest forms of torture are being used towards Azerbaijani citizens as well. So this autocratic regime defends its own interest by suppressing the rights of citizens, and they are especially cruel in terms of Armenians, considering long-term hatred and state-sponsored discriminatory policy. And from the reports of international organizations, including Committee for Prevention of Torture, UN Committee Against Torture, and other internationals with torture prevention mandate, they report on such issues. And so we possess information by reading the reports of independent international organizations. And so why not? European Court also dealt with cases of Azerbaijani human rights defenders, journalists, and other protected persons about their torture, illegal detainment, and like persecution based on political reasons and so on. So those cases also provide very solid factual information about what is happening in Azerbaijan. As concerns Armenian prisoners, we obtain information through families who are now in contact with prisoners. So during short phone conversation, some part of treatment might be discussed, which is not very common. And we collect information through repatriated Armenians. So they are very useful source to understand what happened during captivity period. And after repatriation, they are free from Azerbaijani suppression threats, and they honestly confess the treatment. So we receive very detailed testimonies by returned prisoners, and we verify this information by cross-examination, by comparing with other testimonies, subjecting them to medical examination, to different forms of forensic expert examination. And with this evidence, through this puzzle effects, we try to rebuild the reality that our prisoners faced in Azerbaijan. So what we have learned from those sources, there was torture, maltreatment, and both physical and mental forms of torture were used. So in some institutions, it was very intensive. In other institutions, maybe physical beatings were not very common, but the forms of humiliation and were actively in application. So this degrading treatment, humiliation was everywhere at any stage towards any Armenian, and it was combined with torture, physical or mental.
I see. Are there any new cases that, as we know, a year ago, there was this ethnic cleansing of Artsakh, and did it generate any new cases in regards to this torture, maltreatment, imprisonment, or other like war crimes during this 1 or 2 days of war?
During this aggression, yes, there were new cases of captivity. So we had 9 captivity cases arising from military operation. One of these 9 is returned during 2023 December exchange. However, the other 8 are still in Azerbaijan. For the first time, we had the issue of political prisoners. This attack and also blockade of Lachin corridor led to a situation where the fates of all Armenians in Artsakh were controlled by Azerbaijan, and this full control enabled them to unlawfully arrest former high-ranking military and political officials of Artsakh, which was a part of their plan. So this operation was well planned, and it had an aim to punish those individuals who contributed to self-determination of Artsakh, its international recognition, also recognition from international communities of human rights emergencies that arose during blockade period and so on. So basically, Azerbaijan retaliated them for their efficient pro-Artsakh lawful activities. So for the first time, we have political Armenian prisoners in Azerbaijan. But of course, as a result of this aggression, we have killings, we have missing people issues, we had violence during their transfer through Lachin corridor to Armenia. Many Armenians faced various forms of mental and physical violence. And of course, we do have the issue of forced deportation, which is a crime against humanity. And for the first time in a history, we have Artsakh without Armenians living on that land.
We see that Azerbaijan retaliates when we file all these cases in this international courts, that they also file those cases in return. And according to Pashinyan, there may be some sort of agreement in which we, I believe, retrieve some of those cases in response to them retrieving them. How would you evaluate what's going on here with this 2 countries sort of filing against each other?
So the filings by Azerbaijan are false and with the aim to mirror human rights violations and other pertaining issues. So discriminatory policy, torture, and so on. And by through this effect, they want I would say, equal reaction from international community. So they start blaming Armenians for actions that they committed, and they create confusion. So for international actors, it becomes difficult to identify issues and diagnose properly the situation. And as a result of this false confusion, they don't make targeted, well-addressed reaction, calls, urges, and so on. So the first purpose of these counter claims is to create a delusion about real issues. And second, to bargain these interstate cases. So maybe Armenia is not well positioned in military or diplomatic arena. However, at this point, we were very successful in legal arena, even with the help of provisional and interim measures. We were able to achieve orders reinstating Armenian rights, including about this Lachin corridor, and those legal rulings they generated political pressure on Azerbaijan. So from this we understand that legal proceedings are very painful for Azerbaijan, even at this point when they are not completed yet. So Azerbaijan predicts the outcome and consequences, legal and political, and tries to take actions to disrupt this process. So they pressure on Armenian government to withdraw interstate cases, and their claim is with dispute you cannot achieve a peace, and for peace process it's a must not to have any pending litigation or disputes within international arena, which is not true. Again, we have this false contradiction between legal disputes and peace. Peace does not prevent legal processes. Instead, during peace, with this civilized manner, states try to resolve all issues through legal instruments instead of resorting to military force or creating tension in political or diplomatic relations and so on. So we understand the real aim behind Azerbaijani narratives. They want to avoid the consequences of legal proceedings. They are well positioned in political negotiations. So their aim is to pressure on Armenian government to eventually withdraw all interstate cases, which is very dangerous from Armenian perspective.
I see. I know that Armenia, the Armenian side, filed 7 Magnitsky cases, I believe, Magnitsky sanction cases in May. Could you tell us more about what those sanctions are and what's the status of those filings?
Mm-hmm. Armenian government is not proactive in terms of raising the accountability issues, including sanctions over perpetrators or commanders of those war crimes and crimes against humanity. However, civil society is very mindful of those mechanisms and the need to implement those mechanisms. So our organization, together with Armenian Legal Center for Human Rights and Justice, we prepared those submissions. We provide very solid evidence to show that crimes coming within the ambit of these Magnitsky regulations were committed by Azerbaijan. We were successful to identify the units or officials which committed or commanded the committal of such crimes, and we also justified why politically it is correct to impose those sanctions. These 7 submissions cover many incidents, for example, all the crimes that were committed in Hadrut during 2020 war or back in 2016. They cover like extrajudicial killings of prisoners of war. They deal with illegal detainment of Armenians, also these false convictions of Armenians, where this whole prosecutorial and court system was serving the interest of their politicians in blatant violation of international human rights standards and so on. So those submissions reveal crimes against humanity, war crimes, and other grave forms of fundamental human rights violations. So officially, they are submitted with State Department and Treasury. So we expect also internal discussions to the extent that further clarification is needed. And next steps are more about efficient advocacy, because these sanctions have two components: legal component to justify the committal of sanctionable crimes or violations, and the second, this political part, which will enable U.S. government to understand that sanctions are within the national interest of U.S. So, and to work on this part, we need some efforts with U.S. government. We are cooperating with different organizations, mostly ANCA, to advocate for sanctions within the U.S. But I would say it is also in the interest of reputation of the U.S. To apply those sanctions. We have seen how actively sanctions are being used in other parts of post-Soviet Union countries. However, at this point, Azerbaijan enjoys immunity, and we don't want to believe that geopolitical factors are more important than human rights issues, and the declared devotion commitment for human rights would be undermined on the account of political factors.
Has there been a case so far of Azerbaijan itself punishing perpetrators of these crimes, or has there been a successful case where these international mechanisms worked to ultimately bring to justice those criminals?
So in terms of international mechanism, I would say yes, because we have judgments and we have now execution supervised by a committee of ministers. Of course, Azerbaijan is not willing to immediately implement the court judgments. However, this creates difficulties for Azerbaijan, because each time the issue is raised, is considered, discussed in a political body, and they pressure on Azerbaijan by depriving some of the rights of Azerbaijan. And we have seen also suspension of the voting rights of Azerbaijani delegation within Council of Europe, where the court system exists and where those judgments were delivered. So we don't claim that the the only reason of suspension was the court activities. However, we think it was a contributing factor for these political sanctions within Council of Europe, and we have to continue our work to generate more pressure on Azerbaijan within this system with the help of court judgments. But as concerns efforts by Azerbaijani own initiative, we have seen fake efforts. For example, they imitate legal proceedings and then conviction for an Azerbaijani officer for torture or for mutilation of dead bodies. And then we see very lenient punishment applied, for example, 2 years imprisonment on parole, so no real imprisonment, but release based on unknown conditionalities. Then when we try to understand who is the person, what is the fate of this person within Azerbaijani society, we find out that they exercise the same lifestyle as other non-convicted people, and then we find their names as awarded officials or members of armed forces. So we see that within their own society, they glorify those actions, give promotions, awards, but at the same time, they fabricate criminal cases, fake conviction without any factual consequences, and then they use these cases before international bodies to show that Azerbaijan offers effective remedies to redress the rights of Armenians within Azerbaijan. This happened during the review of Azerbaijani report this year by UN Committee Against Torture. In any case, our organization and other organizations gave evidence showing that crimes happened, there is no punishment, there is full impunity supported by state efforts, and those convictions are of false nature, and committee basically shared our opinion, clearly providing recommendation to Azerbaijan to create effective real mechanism in order to bring the perpetrators to justice. Realistically, without elimination of hatred and discriminatory policy, we cannot expect effective and adequate response from domestic authorities. So the starting point would be elimination of racism, which cannot be done at this point with this rhetoric by high-level officials, including Aliyev's family.